Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're lineup building for week 8 of the NFL season over on Draftkings, more so focusing on cash game roster construction. Now, a couple disclaimers before we start this. Number one, the purpose of this video is not for me to give you guys a lineup to use in all of your contests. You guys have to be able to think for yourselves and build your own lineups. I'm just simply going through a cash game roster construction process that I use each and every single week to try to build a nice, safe cash game lineup. And I'm pretty much just targeting players that meet a certain criteria. One would be getting sufficient volume. 2, I like their matchup. 3, I like their price tags. And 4, they're going to be decently high owned. And just overall some nice safe plays, because in cash games, we only need to beat about half of the field. And we don't get anything extra finishing in first place compared to finishing in 500th place given the contest size. In tournaments, yeah, we can find those low end plays that are going to take us to the very top. But in cash games, I'm just trying to build the safest lineup possible and let other people make mistakes. Also, if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. So when I build cash game lineups, the first thing I do is head to the running back section, because these are not the guys I want to use as lineup fillers at the very end. I want to get the guys that I want the absolute most, because these are the players that are going to get the most volume in my lineup. Because, I mean, we've seen running backs like guys like Derrick Henry. They can get 20 to 30 touches. We're not going to see that out of wide receivers. Sometimes we get lucky with like 20 targets like we saw with Tyler Lockett last week, but that's not something you can bank on each and every single week. So running backs, those are the staples of my lineups, especially in cash games and tournaments. You can get those quarterback, wide receiver stacks, tight end stacks, whatever. But in cash games, the first thing I like to do is focus on running backs. That's exactly what we're going to do here. Now, there's quite a few good running back plays this week, and I think like a cash game pool would be Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Kareem Hunt, Jamal Williams, Giovanni Bernard, Josh Jacobs, and there's a couple of other guys you could throw in there as well. But the absolute one I want to plug in for sure is Kareem Hunt this week at $6,900. I think he's just a little bit too cheap here for the role he's going to have in this offense. And the thing is, this is a big weather game as well. I have a nice little sticky note here on my laptop just to make sure I remember what all games have weather. And there's quite a few. I think I left one off in the New England game, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be targeting anyone in that game. But the Cleveland game, it's going to be one of the worst ones on the slate. Sustained 25 to 30 mile per hour winds, it says, and 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. So I think the passing game might be a little bit shot here, but the good thing is that the Raiders, they suck versus running backs, one of the worst teams in the league, giving up nearly the most points per game to the running back position, and the Browns like to run the football, and Kareem Hunt's one of the most talented running backs in the league, so this sets up perfect for him. I don't see how you fade Kareem Hunt. He should have a smash game here. He should get you anywhere from 20 to 25 touches, maybe even more if it's going to be that bad out and they just completely rely on the ground. So Kareem Hunt, I think if he was almost $8,000, I would still be interested. So $6,900, I certainly like him a lot here. And he's actually only had one game below double-digit points this year, and that was versus Pittsburgh, one of the best run defenses in the NFL. And they're also trailing like by 30 points in that game. So Kareem Hunt, I am expecting a very, very big game from him, and he's one of the first guys I want to plug in all of my lineups this weekend. Now, the second guy I want in here is Jamal Williams, because Aaron Jones is out. If I knew Aaron Jones was going to be out in my mid-range plays video, I would have put Jamal Williams in there over probably Josh Jacobs. But I like Jamal Williams a lot here. Last week, Aaron Jones did miss the game versus Houston, and Williams got around 25 opportunities. He had 19 carries and 5 targets, which is exactly 24. So I think we should expect around 20 to 25 touches here for Jamal Williams. And it's a good matchup versus Minnesota. And they have a pretty high team total on this slate as well, nearly at 30. Now, it has dropped a little bit throughout the week because the weather in this game is going to be pretty rough, which I think, kind of like Kareem Hunt, is only going to make Jamal Williams an even better play, because they might have to rely on the ground just a little bit more, because it's going to be hard to throw deep balls to Devontae Adams all game. So the wind right now is going to be around 25 miles per hour sustained wind, so I think that's going to just give a boost to the run game here. So Jamal Williams in a very soft matchup versus Minnesota. They're also favorites at home, so everything sets up well here for Jamal Williams. And I know his price, they come up from the bare minimum, really the bare minimum, but the bare minimum from running backs this year at $4,000. Now he's up to $6,100, but that's still fine for me because he's on a great offense. He's a pretty good player, and he's going to be a little bit involved in the passing game as well. So we're going to plug in Jamal Williams here, and I love these two running backs a lot in cash games this week. Kareem Hunt, Jamal Williams. Now we'll head to the flex spot, because I always like to go through running backs and cash games for the most part, just to lock up that volume. And really, I think there's 3 ways you can go, or I guess maybe even 4 ways. I think one, you could either go with Alvin Kamara, or you can go with Derrick Henry if you're spending up. And there's definitely enough money, salary relief options at the wide receiver position and tight end position and quarterback position this week to spend up for Alvin Kamara or Derrick Henry. If you want to go more mid-range, we have Josh Jacobs. Or if you want to go, I guess, kind of value, more so mid-range / value, we have Giovanni Bernard, who should see around 20 touches in this game. But I'm going to be honest, the Bengals offensive line is not that great. He was not efficient on the ground last week. He only had, 37 rushing yards on 13 carries. He got it done through the air, though. He caught all 5 of his targets for around 60 yards and a touchdown where he got 20.6 points. But this offensive line is not that great, and Tennessee is easier to pass on than it is to run. I think he's a fine option. It's just there's enough value at wide receiver this week where I could spend up for a stud running back. So I think that's what I'm going to go with in this lineup. And honestly, I love Alvin Kamara, but I like Derrick Henry just a little bit more. I think, the matchup's not very good versus Chicago. They have been pretty stingy versus running backs this season, but Kamara is going to be the only guy here. There's no, I was going to say Traquan Smith, there's no Michael Thomas, there's no Emmanuel Sanders, there's no Callaway. Kamara, I would be surprised if he doesn't get double-digit targets here. We know what he can do in the passing game. Just the last few weeks, 14 targets, 4, but then 10 and 8, and I would expect him to have above 20 points here. But Chicago, he's really the only guy that the Bears defense has to key in on, and if they bottle him up, I don't know. I really like Derrick Henry here because that offense you have to worry a little bit. You have to worry about some other players more. Like you got to stop AJ Brown, Ryan Tannehill's obviously. I've been having a fantastic season. Jonnu Smith's going to be a threat because the Bengals have been awful versus Titans this season. And look, Derrick Henry, even if you plan to stop him, you still really can't stop him because the guy is an absolute bowling ball. It's really hard to tackle this guy. And especially with the wind going on in this game, 15, 20 mile per hour winds, they should rely on Derrick Henry here. And I know he's expensive, but that guy gets volume each and every single week. I think we should expect around 20 to 30 touches, and this is a very poor Cincinnati run defense. So Derrick Henry, I like him just slightly above Alvin Kamara. They're kind of just both a coin flip play. I would have no issue with both. But I'm going to side with Derrick Henry here just because I just like the matchup a little bit more, and it's going to be really hard to stop this guy. He just does not have that same floor in the passing game that Alvin Kamara has. So maybe at the end of this lineup, if I have 200 extra bucks, maybe I'll side with Alvin Kamara there. But for right now, I'm going to plug in Derrick Henry. And I really like these 3 running backs a lot in cash games. Kareem Hunt, Jamal Williams, Derrick Henry. Each one should get over 20 touches in this game, and they all have good matchups. So now at this point, I usually like to go to the wide receiver position. But there's a quarterback that I like a lot this week, and I feel like I'm just going to end up plugging him in a cash game, so I don't have to really worry about weather there. And it's a 54-point over-under. And since there's really no weather to worry about, I'm just going to plug in Jimmy Garoppolo. They're playing in Seattle, and they are just one of the worst pass defenses in the league, and one of the worst pass defenses I've ever seen for the most part. Now, I know Jimmy G is not having a good season, like 9 points, 23, 1, 13, and 19. Nothing fantastic, but the Seattle Seahawks are just getting absolutely killed versus the pass this season. They're allowing nearly 400 passing yards per game, which sounds absolutely insane. They're just getting absolutely killed through the air. So Jimmy G, I'm not expecting too much here. He doesn't have Deebo Samuel, which sucks as well, but there's a decent chance he could get to 300 passing yards here. Maybe you get around 2 touchdowns, which is fine with me. And like I said, not having Deebo sucks, but Brandon Ayuk and Kendrick Bourne and George Kittle, I think there's enough to go around for Jimmy G to have at least 250 and 2, which is fine for me at $5,400. He is super cheap this week, and again, we don't really have to worry about weather in this game, which is a boost because a lot of these games there's a ton of weather. So Jimmy G, I feel pretty good just plugging him in for the cheap price point, and if you want to pair him with one of his wide receiving options besides George Kittle, they're very cheap. Like Brandon Ayuk's below $6K, and then Kendrick Bourne's around $3,500, I believe. So I feel pretty good about Garoppolo in cash games this week, and it's really just a free pump play for the most part and pretty much the best matchup you can ask for. All right, so now that we got the quarterback out of the way, we have $4,700 left per player, which there's tons of value wide receiver. There's value at tight end, and there's obviously always value at the defense. So we can pretty much do whatever we want with our lineup. Now, the first wide receiver I want to plug in this week, look, there's a lot of good wide receiver plays like Devontae Adams. He's got a great matchup versus Minnesota, but I do worry about the wind. Tyler Lockett's coming off one of the best fantasy performances of all time. Adam Thielen, a bit worried about Adam Thielen here just because of the weather, so I'm probably not going to be on Adam Thielen this week, although he was one of my favorite studs plays early on in the week. But again, I said I wasn't going to care too much about weather early on in the week, but now that it's Saturday afternoon, we can kind of start worrying about weather, and I definitely have some concerns there for the passing game. But the one guy I like a ton, one of my favorite plays on the entire slate, and really just a cash game lock, it's Keenan Allen at $6,200. His price did not come up last week. It was $6,200, and he had 13 targets, caught 10 of them for over 100 yards and 25.5 fantasy points. His quarterback, Justin Herbert, has been absolutely awesome. He looks like the real deal, and Keenan Allen's obviously his favorite target, and Keenan Allen's a very, very good wide receiver. It's not like he's just getting volume because he's on the field. The guy's really good, and he's getting volume. in this matchup versus Denver is a pretty good one. And Keenan Allen's getting volume each and every single week. Now, week 5 versus New Orleans, you got to keep in mind he only played like a drive in that game, but he caught all 2 of his targets for a touchdown. But if you just take that game out of the equation, he's got 13 targets, 11 targets, 19 targets, and 10 targets in this game in games with Justin Herbert. This is a pretty poor pass defense versus Denver. So Keenan Allen, it's just a smash spot here. I don't see how you really fade him in cash games. He should easily pay off that price point at 6,200. And now it gets a little bit interesting after that, because after the Keenan Allen play, there's no one I really consider like an absolute lock in cash game. So it can get a bit wide open here. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to plug in a tight end just to fill a couple more positions in. So there's a lot of guys I like George Kittle. Obviously, it's a good matchup versus Seattle. He's an easy pairing with Jimmy Garoppolo. He could easily have a huge game. Travis Kelce versus one of the worst teams in the league versus the New York Jets. I just worry that they might blow them out. He might not hit his absolute ceiling, but there's a decent chance if they only play 3 quarters on their offense, they could still put up over 30 points and have a huge game. So Travis Kelce is certainly in play. Darren Waller's my favorite tight end plays of the entire week. Cleveland has struggled versus the tight end position this year. And with the wind being as bad as it's going to be in Cleveland, this could be a bit of a dink and dunk game for Derek Carr. And Darren Waller is certainly capable of getting 10-plus targets here. So I think he's an excellent play. But I feel like I'm going to have to go a little bit cheaper at the tight end position because I only have 4,300 left, which it's not super small, but it's not a ton either. So I'm going to try to save a little bit of money here and go with a cheaper tight end. And one of my favorite cheap tight ends this week is Jonnu Smith at only $4,100. I know last week he didn't really do anything at all. He only had 1 catch for 9 yards, but he did have 4 targets. And early on in the season, he was having a great year. 13 points, 24, 11, 21. Then since then it dropped off a little bit. But I think Jonnu's going to have a really good day here. Cincinnati's one of the worst teams in the league versus tight ends. They just gave up 3 touchdowns to 2 backup tight ends on the Browns last week. And Jonnu Smith, the guy's pretty good. His quarterback's been playing great football since week 7 last year. And this is definitely one of the better games to target for DFS purposes. Now, you got to keep in mind it's going to be a little bit windy here, but it's definitely not as bad as the Vegas-Cleveland game and the Minnesota-Green Bay game, so I'm not super concerned about it. And Jonnu Smith's not a guy that's running 50-yard fades down the sideline anyway, so either way, I'm not too concerned about that. So at $4,100 and a super soft matchup versus Cincinnati, I like Jonnu Smith quite a bit, and I feel pretty comfortable plugging him in. I know I have already 2 Tennessee guys here, but I mean, it's just mainly a price play and a matchup play for Jonnu Smith, and both these guys can have efficient games for sure. So now at this point, we have 4,400 left, and let's just plug in a defense so we know what we can do with our wide receivers, because I don't want an absolute awful defense. There's a couple of defenses I like this week. Obviously, I like the Kansas City Chiefs at $4,500. I mean, they're facing the Jets, but I'm not one to really spend top dollar for defenses. I think you could also look at the Saints versus Chicago with more than likely no Allen Robinson. I could see them having a pretty strong game, even though they're on the road. But the weather's supposed to be pretty iffy in that game as well. So definitely like the Saints defense. And then after that, the Titans would be a good correlation play against Cincinnati just to have Derrick Henry. And assuming they have the lead, they could just pound the rock with Derrick Henry the majority of the game. So I think the Titans is fine, but they don't have that great of a defense. And Joe Burrow is certainly capable of putting up a lot of points. So I don't love it. But one of my favorite defenses this week for the salary relief is the Packers, and I think it's a nice correlation play with Jamal Williams. And also the weather is going to be a major factor in this game, and Kirk Cousins is certainly not a world beater. So I feel pretty good about the Packers defense. Now, they have not been that great this season. They've been awful versus the run, which Dalvin Cook has certainly have a huge game versus them, but they've been pretty decent versus the pass. And I do expect the Packers to be playing with the lead in this game, which means the Vikings might have to throw the ball quite a bit and the win. And I think it's just a pretty decent spot for the Packers given their price point. So we'll plug them in, and it's a nice correlation with Jamal Williams. And now we have 5,200 remaining per player, which is actually not that bad. We can pretty much do whatever we want because there's definitely a couple of value wide receivers that I like a lot. And we might go a couple of different ways. So after I build this one, we'll try to build another one and see which one we like a little bit better. But the wide receiver I want to plug in right now that's cheap is Kendrick Bourne, just to get that pairing with Jimmy Garoppolo. You can certainly play Garoppolo naked here just because of that price point, but I'm going to plug in Bourne just to get the correlation here. And I know the guy's not a super exciting play, but with no Deebo Samuel, he's going to be on the field more. He's going to get more targets. And if you're looking at the games before Deebo Samuel was back, the guy was involved in the offense. 5 targets, 5, 6, 6, 4, and then dropped off the past 2 weeks at 3 and 1. But still, I think he's a viable option here. He's super cheap, and Seattle is the worst team in the league versus wide receivers by far. They're allowing 64.3 DraftKings points per game to the position, which is insane. Nearly 300 receiving yards per game to the position as well, and just getting absolutely killed. So Kendrick Bourne doesn't need to do too much here to hit value. And if he scores a touchdown at $3,500, you are certainly going to be happy. I would like to get Ayuk in here as well, but I'm not going to go full-on stack of the 49ers pass game here. So now we have 6,900 left, which I think it's a pretty good spot because there's a couple of guys I do like in that price range. I believe Tyreek Hill is either 6,800 or 60. Yeah, he's 6,700, so we could play him as well. A.J. Brown's got a good matchup versus Cincinnati, but the weather might be a bit of an issue in that game. I don't want to have 3 Titans in my cash game lineup. I don't feel that great about it. Stephon Diggs, there's not going to be any Stephon Gilmore here, so it's a softer matchup versus New England, but weather's going to be an issue in Buffalo. I don't really see a reason to want to go Stephon Diggs. But Tyreek Hill. So I've mentioned all week that I do have concerns with the Chiefs just having to take out their starters because they're up so much versus the Jets, which I definitely think is going to be the case. They're 20-point favorites at home here, and the Jets just suck in all aspects. But I think in the first 3 or maybe 3.5 quarters, they should be able to do enough where they're going to pay off their price tags just because it's a great spot versus the Jets. And even if they are up 20 or something and they have to leave the game early, there's a good chance Patrick Mahomes probably threw like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 touchdowns versus the Jets here. So I think Tyreek Hill can still have a pretty good game. And he's actually been super consistent this season. He's usually a guy that we view as a boom or bust option, but he's been consistent this year. Like, if we're looking at his game log, 17-5 versus Buffalo was his worst game of the year, but 18, 16, 21, 21, and 15. He's getting volume each and every single week. We know the big play upside that he has. He's got the best quarterback in football throwing in the ball. There's no weather concerns here, so we don't have to worry about no deep balls being shot just because there's a lot of wind, and even that Patrick Mahomes has got a cannon, so I wouldn't even be super concerned about that. But it's a good matchup versus the Jets. They're one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL, and at $6,700, I do like that price tag, and I could see Tyreek Hill having a very strong game as long as as long as they don't get out in the second half or they don't play at all. I think they're going to at least play 3 quarters here. It's just a matter of if they have to take them out just because they're up by so much. So Tyreek Hill, I feel pretty good about that. And we have 200 left over, so I guess there's a little bit of wiggle room to go with that, whatever else you want, but Jimmy G, soft matchup versus Seattle. Kareem Hunt, great matchup versus the Raiders. Also going to be a bit of an issue to throw the ball in this game with all the wind they're supposed to be. Jamal Williams, similar scenario to Kareem Hunt, and no Aaron Jones. Keenan Allen's kind of like the lock of the slate for me. It's a soft matchup versus Denver's pass defense, and he's only $6,200. That's just a little bit silly for me. He should be close to 7K, if not above 7K. Kendrick Bourne's just a cheap pairing with Jimmy G. Tyreek Hill, he was the last guy we fit in, but it's a good matchup versus the Jets, and he's been actually pretty consistent so far this season, and we know he's got huge play potential. Jonnu Smith, he's a little bit too cheap here. It's a very, very good matchup versus Cincy. Derrick Henry should get around 20 to 30 touches here. They're favorites versus Cincinnati. They have a pretty high implied team total. It's a soft matchup versus them, and would it surprise anybody if Henry went up for over 200 yards and scored 2 touchdowns? He just has that upside each and every single week. Then the Packers defense is kind of just a correlation with Jamal Williams, but there's going to be weather in this game, and they're home favorites, so it kind of just makes sense. But there's a couple of other things I want to try. So instead of the Tyreek Hill and Kendrick Bourne route, I want to see if maybe we could go with like a Tyler Lockett, just because I do think he's going to be pretty popular this week, and that's definitely going to make him a nice cash game play. And when it comes to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I would assume Tyler Lockett's going to have the softer matchup here in the slot because DK Metcalf's going to be going up against Verrett, and he's having a really good season so far. And I think they could funnel more targets to Tyler Lockett in the slot versus Jamar Taylor. So let's plug in Tyler Lockett because this is one of the best games for fantasy purposes because there's a lot of good fantasy options. And again, we don't have any weather to be concerned about, which is not something we can say for a lot of these games this week. And it's kind of just a run back with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I would like to have a pairing with him with Kendrick Bourne still, but we only have 3,300 left in our lineup, so I don't think that's going to be possible. But I know there's a $3,200 wide receiver that I certainly like this week as a value play, and that's Denzel Mims at $3,200. And this is mainly just a volume play because who else are they going to really get the ball to? And they're 20-point dogs on the road here, so they're going to have to throw the ball pretty much all game. There's no scenario where I can see them establishing the run. So Denzel Mims, he had 7 targets last week. He caught 4 of them for 8.2 fantasy points. And look, he's really the only guy here that's going to be able to do something. Now, Kansas City's been very tough versus opposing wide receivers this season and just versus the pass. They're more of a run funnel defense, but the Jets really have no choice to be throwing the ball pretty much all game here, especially in the second half. So Mims, would I say I love the matchup? No, but he's pretty much free, and he should see close to double-digit targets here. So I'll throw Mims in here, and that's going to leave us 100 left. And I don't think that's a bad lineup either. So we went from, Tyreek Hill and Kendrick Bourne to Tyler Lockett and Denzel Mims. That feels pretty good as well. And if we go back to the original, I believe we had 200 left. And like I said, if we had 200 left, we could always go up to Alvin Kamara if you guys wanted to. So let me plug these guys in. And then we had Tyreek Hill. So there's a 6,700 left. And if you want to go with Alvin Kamara above Derrick Henry, that's possible too. Then that just evens out your lineup. So there's a couple of ways you can go here. But I definitely think that's at least somewhat of a solid cash game build. Again, guys, don't take the lineups and just throw it in all of your contests. You got to be able to build your own, but you can use the same process into your own lineups, and hopefully have a fantastic weekend with that. But with that being said, I'm going to get out of here, guys. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. I have my core plays video up later today, probably either later this afternoon or early on in the evening. And yeah, I'm going to get out of here. Hope you guys enjoy the games tomorrow and have a fantastic rest of your weekend.